Hi, I'm Tyler Fertel, here joined by former U.S. men's national team soccer player John O'Brien. John, thank you very, very much for joining me here today.
Yeah, good to be here. I'm excited to have a little conversation with you.
And it's so cool talking to someone that is really at the top of the ranks of American soccer players throughout history. And I just want to get started here, really starting off with the beginning of your maybe professional soccer career, we'll say, just because it led into that. But you actually went to my high school in Los Angeles called Brentwood. And after a couple years there, you ended up joining the Ajax youth national team the Ajax youth team or youth academy in the Netherlands. And so you moved out there. And so I'm wondering, do you know how their youth academy, which is very prestigious, I mean, it's an extremely great club in Europe. Do you know how they really gained the attention of you, or really you got in contact with them?
Yeah, I was in the States at the time, playing club soccer as well as Brentwood soccer. And I was also on the youth national team at that level at that time. I mean, so I was doing really well in the US, and my club coaches were really aware of it. And they had strong kind of affinity for European and South American soccer. And they were like, wow, is there opportunities to get you to play elsewhere? And they were looking out for me, which was really helpful. And I think my dad was also, he recognized it and saw that, at the time there wasn't a clear path to like professional soccer in the States. The MLS didn't even exist. So one of my coaches had a connection in Holland we reached out to, just asking if I could train for a summer with some Dutch team. And it ended up being that they placed me at Ajax. I was 14 at the time, so pretty young. Went over there for 3 weeks, trained. It was really intense and hard. They thought I was a good player, but they're like, yeah, you're too young to come move over here now. But let's keep in touch. And so a few years later, I got to come back over at the age of 16 and actually go on trial. We went to Paris
Wow.
for a youth tournament, and that was just fantastic, like playing against Paris Saint-Germain and some German teams. And I impressed enough where they kind of like arrogantly, as Ajax was known at the time, said like, yeah, you can come join us. It's not like we're going after you, but you can come join us. And so we started putting all the pieces together to make that happen for my senior year of high school,
Wow.
moving over there and joining the academy.
Mhm. That's crazy to think about. I mean, I'm a senior in high school now, so really going over there to Ajax. I mean, you were really one of the first Americans to go play at a top club in Europe, and so I'm just really wondering, what were you feeling or thinking when you kind of were the only one, at least at Ajax, that was American, but really one of the only Americans to be playing at a household top club in Europe like that?
It was exciting. I recognized it as an opportunity when I would talk to my peers back in the States. It was really like, wow, you're really at a good club, at a good place. So that made me feel special. And it made me also kind of, I always had a chip on my shoulder. Like I felt like I could play good soccer and wanted to represent the US real well. So that drove me a lot of time. There was a time like that was a lot of trying to make it. Can I make it? Can I, as an American, do this? And I remember being on the first team at Ajax at one point, having kind of made it. I was a starter, more or less. I was struggling with injuries, but I was a starter. I was at that level, and I was like, what comes next? And that kind of blew my mind because a lot of Ajax players, you grow up there and then you kind of get sold somewhere else or go somewhere else. And I couldn't even imagine that, and that was daunting. It was like, okay, what now? I felt at that time I didn't have very good role models for people who'd kind of managed the European system well and climb the ladder.
And how did you kind of adapt to that lifestyle? I mean, living in Europe and in the Netherlands after living your childhood in the United States of America, and really no one who came from your same background, how did you really adapt to that new lifestyle and really try to make yourself feel comfortable in what for a lot of people would be an uncomfortable situation in a new place?
It was really hard the first couple of years, big time culture shock. I mean, I was moved in with a Dutch family and I was taking the bus to training. It was an all Dutch environment. So I had to learn Dutch quickly. Um, After a couple of years, 2 years really in the youth and noticing how good my soccer was getting, but still socially struggling and trying to find my place, I felt like I started to find people who were more like me. I went to an international college for a little bit and met some people there. And I think my identity, I started to kind of like, okay, I'm here now. like, who am I? And started to find that more. And as I actually climbed the ranks, the team itself became more international, which was interesting. And it was actually like the language in the locker room was English mostly. So that kind of played in my favor, where I felt even more at home kind of navigating that environment. And I can kind of be in both worlds, the Dutch and the international. So it was hard for, quite a few years there. But I think at one point I really kind of, said, hey, I'm here. This is what I'm doing. Let's try to make the best of it. Learned the language really well, and started really to find kind of my places where I fit in best.
And after some time at Ajax, you earned your professional contract, obviously. But once you really got that professional contract and became part of the first team, I believe they loaned you to another team in the Netherlands, right, for the 1998-1999 season. So after really becoming comfortable with Ajax, they kind of sent you somewhere else for a season. And so I was just wondering, I mean, loans are not something that are very often talked about in American sports. They don't exist in American sports. And it's also something that you can't really understand if you're not a player. I mean, I feel like it's something that is really unique to European soccer, or just soccer outside of the United States, I'll say. And so I just wanted to see if you would talk a little bit about how it was, what that experience was like for you, how it was really adjusting to a new club, knowing that they're likely only going to be there for a singular season. And yeah.
So how that went, I was on the reserve team at Ajax. I had a contract there for 2 years on the reserve team. And the second year in the reserve team, Jan Wouters, who was a famous Dutch soccer player, midfielder, really good technique, but also known as a bruiser in midfield. And he became our second team head coach, and he really liked me. He put me right at the center of the team, and I had these great conversations with him. And he also had a contract that he would eventually become the first team coach at Ajax. So he believed in me. I was coming to the end of that term, and he was like, hey, we want you to stay at Ajax. There's a lot of players in front of you on the first team. How about you go to Utrecht, which was his former club, for a year, get some experience, and then, we'll see how it goes. But I'm kind of scheduled to become head coach of the first team. We'll see if I bring you back then. And I thought that was a great idea, because I was kind of like really wanted to get going. I'd finished the reserve team, was at a place like, I want to see what I could do in the top league here. I was fine that it wasn't with Ajax at that time, and also probably knew that jump was maybe a bit big for me. So it was great. I got loaned out, got to play against Ajax and scored against them. And I think our fourth game, which was pretty exciting. And all my buddies were on kind of the bench at Ajax at that time. So here I was, out on the field playing, and they were on the bench. So it was a really great experience for me. We thought I'd actually get loaned out another year, because I had some injuries towards the tail end of the year. But I think transfers and whatnot, Jan Wouters became head coach, and he was like, I want to bring you back. And so I got to go back to Ajax and be on the first team.
And then when you return,
which was really a dream kind of come true. In my mind, it was like, make the first team. So the start of that season, it was a struggle to kind of adjust to that playing level, but it was like I was on that team. So that was great.
Yeah. And when you returned to Ajax, like you just said, for a majority of your time there, I mean, you played left back, and obviously for the U.S. men's national team, you played in the midfield, and left back, at least from what I've read and what I've learned, it doesn't seem like it was your natural position. So how did you really kind of deal with the fact that you weren't playing in maybe your most desired position? And did you ever get frustrated with this?
So under Wouters, I moved around a lot as I was trying to kind of cement a spot. Left midfield, right back, left back. And I think it was under Koeman, who he wasn't too satisfied with the left back at the time and thought I was a decent player, and wanted to get me on the field and move me to left back. At first it was generally just an attitude of I'll do whatever, just get me out on the field. But I do think I was a little bit like, it was a different mentality. At fullback, I had to really be really sharp. I kind of at times wish I would have maybe stayed at Utrecht and played midfield, or found some other way to kind of be more of a midfielder over there. But I was also like, excited to be on that team and to be seeing like how far I could kind of push this. And we were doing really well. We won a league, we won a cup, we were in Champions League, all these things that were pretty exciting in that sense. I do remember with Bruce Arena having a conversation at the time. He didn't know who would play left back on the national team and at the World Cup. And I clearly said to him, like, I just see myself as a midfielder on this team. I think that's where I could do the most, help the team the most. So I was really adamant in that regard of trying to make my way back into kind of a midfielder where I felt like my skills could thrive the most.
Mm-hmm. And talking about Bruce Arena here, with your time with the U.S. men's national team between 1998 and 2006, which was the time that you're on the team, Bruce Arena was between those exact years, he was the head coach as well. And so clearly there is a relationship there. So I was just wondering, what type of relationship did you guys have together? How did you guys really build trust where that you had a spot in the starting lineup when you were healthy and when you were there and present? And what do you really admire about Bruce as a head coach?
Yeah, I guess going into 2002, I didn't know for sure if I'd be a starter. In terms of my track record with the national team, I think it wasn't that cemented. But I was coming off a season in Holland where I was playing every game. I was starting, and we won the title, and we won the cup as well. And so I was really playing at a high level, and I had a lot of confidence with that. And so I think he saw that in my play, how comfortable I was on the ball, keeping it, moving it around, passing it. I think that was something I could really bring to the team and help it. And I think he recognized that. And so, trust kind of built. I think with the 2002 World Cup, me being a mainstay, it kind of cemented that trust. And he really, even though I was injured a lot after that, he really did a lot in advocating for me and trying to help me get back on the field. For 2006, he thought I could still help the team and really kind of trusted me for that. So that was great. And I think maybe with other coaches, I might not even have been at that World Cup. But since he had a lot of trust in me, I think that helped it happen.
Mm-hmm. And going back to the beginning of your career with the U.S. men's national team, it was the 1998 World Cup, which was just before Bruce actually became the head coach. And you were named as a reserve for the 1998 team. And so that meant you didn't travel, but you had to stay ready in case you were needed on the World Cup stage. And so what was kind of that experience for you where you weren't necessarily on the traveling team, but you knew that if your time came and your name was called, you had to be ready, like you had played the games that already occurred? I mean, was it kind of deflating when you weren't named to the team, but still an honor to be a reserve?
I mean, I think at the time I was kind of okay with it. And in the run up, the spring, I was injured as well and didn't get on the field much for the national team. So I understood it. I thought there was a chance I could kind of sneak in. I still had kind of a sense of like, I'm good enough to be on that team. It was funny. Wouters, who I mentioned, being kind of a tough player, had this joke when he heard that I was named as a reserve, because I was named as a reserve. And then I was with the team for a month before the World Cup, playing in friendlies and training. And he had a joke. Oh, that means training with your studs on, in the sense of like, you're going to be kicking people and injuring them. And that was kind of like, right, the harsh competitiveness that was in European soccer can be found at top levels, like really cutthroat. But at the same time, he said, like, that's not you. And I agree with that. That wasn't a way that I wanted to get on the team, by like tearing someone else down. Mm-hmm. So I remember training with the team during that time, and I think I showed myself really well. Steve Sampson was the coach. And so people knew on the team, knew who I was, and knew I was coming, and I'd be there soon, if not that World Cup.
Mm-hmm. And in the warm-up to the 1998 World Cup, you actually made your debut for the team, as you kind of indicated, against Austria. And I'm curious. I mean, it's a very unique thing to really make your debut in that type of game where you're really trying to help everyone really prepare for the biggest stage, which is the World Cup. And so what was that moment like for you to really step on the field for your country, knowing that your country's eyes are on you and that you're wearing that badge on your chest and that it means a lot to a lot of people?
It was great. I mean, I felt like it was a long time coming. I had in the Olympics in 2000. I played really well and was part of that team that got to the semifinals. So I was really itching to get on the field, and because of injuries, it kept kind of taking longer. So I really wanted to get out there. I mean, I knew playing with the U.S. team and playing in games like that, there can be a lot of unpredictableness. It's quite different than at Ajax, where there's a set system and you kind of know how you're going to play and the teams you're going to play. So there's always like nervousness, like how's this going to go? But I was really excited to get out there and start getting in the mix and learning how to play at that level and with that team.
Mm-hmm. Talking about the 2000 Olympics, it was the first time you really played for the U.S. men's national team in a crazy big tournament like that. I mean, the Olympics for soccer are U23, so you got the opportunity to play with a lot of younger guys who you actually ended up playing more with as time went on for the U.S. national team. And so I was just wondering what that experience was like for you to really be building those bonds with guys your age who are playing all over Europe and also all over America and everywhere, and really starting to create those relationships that would become more important as you headed into the 2002 World Cup and on.
Mm-hmm. That was so fun. The Olympics was so much fun. Yeah, we had a good group of guys, and like you said, there was some continuity. Like some of those guys I'd played on the under 15 national team with. I think Josh Wolf, Ben Olsen, who were there. Some guys like Landon Donovan were kind of coming up, and we're Chris Albright, who had a really good tournament. And then you had a few veterans, Brad Friedel, Frankie Hajduk, Jeff Agus, who were there kind of stabilizing the group. So it was just really exciting. We got on a roll and did really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, the people who I was in the Olympics with really bonded with, and it was great. You know, when Josh Wolf was on the 2002 World Cup team too, and Landon Donovan as well. These people who were in that generation.
Mm-hmm. And in that period between the 2000 the 2000 Olympics and then the 2002 World Cup, with your time with Ajax there, what was in the back of your mind always, I need to make sure I keep my spot on the U.S. national team? Or were you always like, I need to show what America is all about? Or was it a combination of really both, where you were confident that you were going to be in that starting 11 when the 2002 World Cup came around, or you really still felt you had to prove yourself to a coach like Bruce Arena and to your country?
Yeah, I knew and always felt that, you know, confidence is earned on the training ground. And I knew at Ajax I was training with some really great players, you know, some that were young, but were going to make their mark. Christian Kivu, Zlatan Ibrahimović, Wesley Sneijder, Rafael van der Vaart, like all went to top clubs throughout Europe. So I just knew like that's my bread and butter. I got to be out there every day competing. And that's where my confidence was built. So I always had that attitude, you know, if I can do it on the daily there, then with the national team, it's gonna, you know, I'm gonna be able to reap the rewards and be on that team and have confidence in my playing in that team. So that's how I viewed it, and I think that really helped. Coming close to the 2002 World Cup, I was definitely aware of it as a tournament coming up and didn't want to miss it. And I think that played into my motivation as well. Like, for somehow I managed to stay healthy a lot of that time and like focus on that. And that was just a great kind of 2001, 2002. And then the culmination at the 2002 World Cup was just a great time for soccer for me.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up a name, Zlatan Ibrahimović. There's both a big name in America due to his time with the LA Galaxy and all across Europe. And so that is, what was a young Zlatan Ibrahimović as confident as he was a couple of years ago, and he retired recently, but he's maintained this high impressiveness throughout his whole career. And what was it really like playing against a guy that is that well known? I mean, he wasn't as big of a name probably when he was that young in comparison to even a decade later, but what was it like playing with someone like that you've seen really be on the highest level for so long?
It's really cool to see how he kind of moved on and kept growing, right? He left Ajax. I mean, he could have spent some more time there and grown, but he went, I think, to Juventus right out of that and did start adjusting to life in Italy and doing well there. I mean, he came there as a 19-year-old, maybe even an 18-year-old to Ajax. So he was young. He was a young guy, and you could see the talent there. You could see the bravado. And then one thing I noticed with him, like he was injured one time, and I noticed how seriously he took his rehab routine. And I'm like, oh, this guy's not just all talk. Like he's got kind of an instrumentality to him where he recognizes like he's got to put in the work, he's got to do certain things. He knows how to develop and grow. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, this guy's got some, he's gonna do okay. He did quite all right.
He did quite all right. He had an amazing career, as we all know. And now I want to get into the all-important 2002 World Cup, where you really, really showed what you were made of and your skill and everything. And you scored in the first game of that World Cup as an underdog against Portugal. You scored very early. And so when that ball went in the net, and I think everyone was surprised that you and the U.S. went up early on a powerhouse, a European household name like Portugal. Everyone was surprised, oh, the U.S. is here and this is their World Cup to really make that run. What was it like being the one to put the ball in that net that early?
Surprising is what it was. Just like, oh my gosh, like the ball just bounced right in front of me and no one's here. I can just kick it in. I had to kind of calm myself and like, okay, calm down, don't hit it over, stroke it. I had to do that. But it was surprising for me to be in that position. It was surprising for our team to be in that position. And then that was one. We scored two and we scored three and we were up 3-0. I don't know. It was like a half hour into the game and it was like, what is going on here? So that was a whirlwind of a game that we, in the end, hung on to the 3 points, and that set us up really well to get out of the group.
Mm-hmm. And was the mentality before and after that game? Obviously, it was an upset there. So was the mentality before and after the game the same? Was it always like, we can win this group, we can make it out of this group? Or after that win against Portugal, was there more confidence in the locker room, more confidence amongst your fellow players or amongst your fellow teammates?
We still weren't confident we could make it out of the group. I think it was just like kind of an attitude of like, we can play against anybody, we can beat anybody. That was kind of like what we were going on, and that was just elation. Like we knew we set ourselves up really well at that point. We had Korea next, right, which is the home nation, had a World Cup. That was intense. They were so physical, such a loud crowd. So we had more to do after that game, for sure. But we managed to kind of eke out a point in that, and then, got lucky too. We lost against Poland, and we got lucky that other results went our way, and we could continue our World Cup journey.
Mm-hmm. And when you continued that World Cup journey and got out of the group, guess who was waiting for you in the round of 16? It was CONCACAF arch rivals Mexico. And so that is a very recognizable game in the history of American men's soccer, in the fact that it is the most kind of relevant 2-0 really score. And obviously, you guys won 2-0 in that game against Mexico in the round of 16 to move on to the quarterfinals. And so that game must have been beyond physical. I mean, it's a CONCACAF rivalry on the brightest stage. So really, what was playing in that game like? Playing against players that you've played before, more kind of close to home, but now out in Korea and Japan, I think it was a dual country host nation thing. So what was it like playing all the way on the opposite side of the world against in that type of game?
Mm-hmm. It was a hot day. We were in Korea and it was hot in the stadium. The locker rooms were super hot. It was just tough. We kind of knew it would be tough. And some of the veterans in the team, I could think of Kobe Jones, Ernie Stewart, like they had confidence. They were like, that's a team we could beat, and that was really cool to see, right? Because we could have got drawn against Italy, who was a team where, historically we haven't had many successes against. So there was some confidence there. Mexico was playing really well. There was a lot of chances early on. We did a formation shift. And so I think we were real efficient in what we did, but we didn't play the prettiest soccer. But I think getting up early, I think we scored 1-0. in the middle of the first half or something like that, and then able to hold on through some good defending and good teamwork. And managed to eke through. And we noticed with them the frustration continually growing as they weren't able to get an equalizer.
And what was it like seeing the reaction after that game? And I mean, the saying Dos a Cero has continued to this day. I mean, even recently when the U.S. beats Mexico 2-0, everyone's thoughts go back to that game where you guys beat Mexico in that round of 16. So what has it really been like knowing that you were part of that?
I think it's great how, it's enriching the soccer environment for U.S. fans, for Mexico fans. It's kind of pulling us together in a way. I mean, I think the first kind of taunts of that Dos a Cero happened in the bus as we saw the Mexican team. They were next to us and we were in our bus. And I think some of the players were kind of doing some taunting of like 2-0, 2-0, and Mexican players were really mad. So it's great that there's a legacy there. And I think for me, there's a big appreciation for Mexican soccer. And I think Mexican and American soccer are really symbiotic in a way and are helping each other grow. And that's a cool thing.
And we, like you said, I mean, really combining to help each other grow in terms of Mexican American soccer. I mean, right now is the League's Cup, which we see a lot of Mexican and American teams playing each other and putting each other on even brighter stages. I mean, we've seen Leo Messi dominating that recently, which has definitely been in the headlines. But yeah, I think that what you're saying about really that kind of legacy, it's definitely helping both teams really grow. And Mexico maybe they were considered above the United States at that point when you were playing, but I think nowadays since that game it's been shifting more and more towards the United States, and we'll see how that goes in the future. But there's definitely something brewing amongst American soccer, and it definitely started with that Dos a Cero victory in the 2002 World Cup. And I want to talk a little bit more about that tournament. Because you played every minute of every game of that quarterfinal run for the United States. And so you were a younger guy on the team, but you were a rock in the midfield. You were someone that people relied on. I read and learned plenty of things where your teammates and coaches said that you were someone that they could rely having the ball at their feet, and that you would get the ball to where it needed to be, that you wouldn't lose the ball in those big moments. So even being a younger guy on the field, how did you know that you had to really be that important guy, and that your players or your teammates were really relying on you to be that person in the midfield?
I never felt like I had to be a certain guy for the team. I, felt like I said, on the training ground at Ajax, the amount of ball work you do, the amount of possession work, right? Like that was something I was good at and I got trained really well at, and I knew that's how I played best. And so I wanted to try to bring that to the game. It's always an honor to hear that people felt confident in me and my ability to handle the ball. And that's what I like to do and tried to do. And I do think it helped the team a little bit in possession or in counterattacks at times. I was also, like with my history as being a fullback, I think I had some defensive qualities that I brought to the World Cup as well, and some fierceness that I learned kind of overseas in man-on-man defending. That also was crucial to kind of helping the team because we were doing a lot of defending in those games as well.
And during your time on the United States national team, whether it was in that World Cup or before or after, do you really have a favorite moment you look back on, whether it was in a game, whether it was in a training session, whether it was during traveling, that you always look back on and you're like, that was awesome?
So many good memories. Yeah, I remember, I think scoring a goal against an island nation where I dribbled through a few players and was able to score. And that was really cool because I felt maybe that was my first goal with the national team, and some players kind of came up and hugged me, and that just felt like a really kind of welcoming thing of like, yeah, I've arrived like on that stage. So
Mhm.
I can kind of pull out that memory. And then there's so many other good memories of just being with that group of players and connecting with them over time.
Uh-huh. And kind of in a way moving on from that, but staying kind of relevant to your career with the US national team and also your club career throughout your kind of time playing soccer, as you've mentioned a lot throughout this interview so far. I mean, you struggled with injuries and it's extremely frustrating. Something that is really out of your control at sometimes. And so it's just something that is difficult to handle, especially when you're playing on such a high level like you were throughout your career. And so I was wondering how you talked a little bit about Zlatan's mentality when he was coming back from that injury. But what was really, how did you learn that was what was your way of really recovering and coming back onto the field as your strongest type of player? I mean, what did you really do to keep the same mentality so you would be the same player you were, or try to be the same player you were before or after that you were before?
I mean, when I was like fit again, I always, missed the game so much that I didn't have to worry about at all about like motivation or anything like that. I was always real excited to play. And sometimes I play like have this burst of like playing really well
Mm-hmm.
for a while. And I think this is pretty normal. I'd do that for a little bit and then I'd have kind of a dip as my body really started to feel the fatigue of like, oh, now I'm training and playing games regularly and just starting to feel sore and a little bit more drained. And then I'd have to kind of try to get myself out of that at
Mm-hmm.
points, with just kind of going back to the basics. That was the phase where I'd kind of go back to the basics, try to do what you can on the field and in training and with your body, just with faith of like, yeah, I'm doing the routines, I'm doing the things, I'll kind of get to where I want to go eventually. So that was an important mental skill. I mean, I think looking back, right, like there's so many advances in physical therapy, and I'm curious how that would have affected me because I had a lot of like overuse and imbalance issues, and they're way better at diagnosing that now. And I think also having psychological support. I don't think I realized at the time how hard it was for me to be in and out and kind of deal with that, and just keep a healthy mindset. If you're sidelined for 4 months or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
in a foreign country, right, where you're still, not with your family or something. So that would have been something I would have done differently looking back.
Mm-hmm. And later in your career, it's difficult for any person, I feel like, to really call it quits when you're so in love with something, as you just said. I mean, you missed soccer. And so that's how you know that you really love the sport and that you have a passion to play the sport. But in 2008, when you were struggling from more injuries, when you came back to the United States and started playing with Chivas, I believe, how did you really know that it was time to retire? How difficult was it to really do that?
Yeah, so that was 2006. I think 2006
2006.
we came back for the Chivas, and then we had the World Cup. Um, I didn't know it was time to retire really, but I knew I was really frustrated with just my body hurting a lot and not feeling very confident that I could, I could get out there on the field and maybe play a few games, but that I couldn't do something that regular. So it was actually kind of a relief in a way to step away from it and start doing some other things. I started taking some classes, and exploring that, thinking about coaching and different things I might want to do. And that was a relief to be like, oh, I can actually make progress in other areas. Every year, kind of as the MLS season would start, guys would get together and do little trainings, and I'd maybe jump out there and train. And I have this hope of like, maybe I'll get back, maybe I'll do it. But I never had any kind of sense of like, yeah, I can actually get back and be a consistent player. So with that, I think gradually kind of the dream died. There was a portion of my career being kind of a, late 20s player who has more experience, who can kind of mentor younger players, who could work with the coach, that kind of position. I think that would have been really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have that. My career was mostly just kind of the young up and comer. So there's some grieving involved with that and finding my way towards, what was next.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about maybe thinking about pursuing a career in coaching. And was there ever the time where you made the decision to go into becoming a doctor rather than really go into coaching, or did it just kind of happen and you didn't really think about it?
Yeah, I had done some courses, got my undergrad, and I'd done some coaching courses. I did like a B license and coached some youth teams. And I was at a college in North Carolina and did some coaching there. But then I asked the head coach if I could do some mental skills work with athletes, and he was like, "Yeah, go for it. Like that'd be great." And once I started doing that, it was like, "Oh, okay, this is what I want to do." I, talked to some players about confidence issues. We developed different kind of strategies and tools to help them, and just seeing how that impacted individual players in ways. And I knew in a way that would affect them post soccer. I was really hooked, and I was like, this is really cool. I want to try to do this. So decided then to get more training and get my doctorate in clinical psychology. And now I'm working with some athletes and also some people who are not athletes. And I enjoy kind of the balance of that. And again, continuing to kind of help people find some kind of peace, confidence, some awareness about who they are, that I know will kind of help them throughout their whole lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And as Dr. John O'Brien, do you feel that your injury history or career really motivated you to get into psychology, or was it more just finding a passion for it post soccer?
Oh, I think it did. Like, I think, I started developing kind of mental routines that really helped me during my career. Was interested in meditation, mindfulness, and some goal setting, those kind of things that I really enjoyed, and found that they had tremendous impact. And then I think that kind of struggle that I experienced through it did kind of send me to a deeper level, right? Like I was a 20-year-old kid who'd been doing one career, and I had to try to find myself in a new way, and that was hard and challenging. So I think some of those struggles definitely got me more interested in psychology, and kind of set me further along that path.
Mm-hmm. And for anyone listening who's an athlete or not, do you have any advice for someone really wanting to create a better mentality or really focus on their mental energy more?
There's so many things out there, and so much of kind of motivation, I feel like, has to do with who you are as a person. But I'd encourage people, if there's people you like to hear from, or kind of like their worldview or what they're saying, if there's ways you can engage with them. It's kind of a lifelong journey, I think, to know yourself more and to know what's going on with you. But I definitely encourage people to look inwards, not just outwards at like what's out there and what's happening. How do I manage that? But like, take some moments to reflect on what's going on with you, journal, meditate, those kind of processes, I think, over the course of a lifetime, have a real huge impact, I think, on people's well-being, and on society's well-being as well. So I'd encourage people to look inwards in ways.
And to finish off the interview here, I really want to go. I really want your unique perspective on something that is very debated in American soccer right now. And I bet you've definitely heard about it, but there is a debate going on, realistic or not, about relegation and promotion being added to American or MLS soccer. And you're someone that played in the Dutch league, which obviously has relegation and promotion, as does most, if not all, of European leagues. And you played in it for essentially basically all of your career or club career. And so you really got a good idea of it and got to experience what it does to players, to teams, to fans. And so I was wondering, now that you're back in the United States and you've been able to probably kind of watch MLS and see how it's grown over the past decades, do you think that it is something that would be beneficial to add to MLS soccer? Or do you think that it would be smarter to continue growing the league as it is and really refrain from adding this extra complicated element?
I don't have much skin in the game in terms of, like, I know a lot of people really, I want MLS to be better and this will do it. I don't have much skin in the game with that, but I do think of stress, right? Like, and that's the idea, is like, we have teams on the lower half, if they're kind of playing for something, there's some stress at the going on, that's going to have them play better. I think it also depends on how people manage stress. I spent one season at Ado Den Haag, And that was a team that was on the lower end and could very much get relegated. And, there's a lot of not managing stress well and kind of nastiness, I think, that would kind of occur in that environment. So I don't know that it's all beneficial. I mean, I think I don't know that it's going to make like American players in general, like way better, because most of the best American players are kind of at the top teams or moving to the top teams anyways. I think for a fan, it's really engaging, those kind of battles that happen. And, Otto would have rivalry with another team that was kind of at the same level, and you really needed those 3 points from them. So create meaning in games and kind of make it fun in different ways, which, as a spectator, you always want to see. So from that aspect, I get it. Financially, I know that MLS has held kind of tight reins on trying to make this thing work, and I'm not looking at the financials. So, maybe I could understand them doing that for now. But I get that people like seeing those kind of intense games, even if it's teams that aren't at the top of the league and playing the best soccer, that could be really fun from a fan perspective.
Well, I agree with everything that you just said. I think there's a lot of factors that go into it, but at least from a fan perspective, for me, I think it would probably add an extra element to the game. Some fans like it, some fans wouldn't like it if their team's at the bottom of the rankings or at the bottom of the standings, actually. But it's something that will probably be discussed more in the next years, decades, as MLS soccer hopefully really expands more and really becomes potentially, it's a long way to go, but potentially amongst on the same level as some European leagues. So, Mr. O'Brien, thank you very, very much for joining me here today. And it's been an honor to talk to you, really learn about your experiences both on and off the field. And yeah.
Great, Tyler. Yeah, it was fun spending time with you, and good luck with your podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tyler's Takes from start to finish. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my podcast on YouTube or whatever platform you are on right now, and share it with your friends. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to leave a review, give me feedback in the comment section, or send me a message on social media. If you'd like to hear more about my podcast or me, you can follow me on Instagram or TikTok as well. See you next time.